American reacts to the collapse of the German government. Let's take a look. Willkommen. My name is Sean Huggins, and this is React with Hugs. Let's hop straight into today's reaction. All right, we're back today with Ruboss the GOAT, and he says, did Germany just lose its government? I heard something's going down with the German government, and we're going to find out what exactly. This is ironic coming, just a couple of days after the American election. But let's see what's going on in Germany, because I have only seen the headlines of some craziness going on and I don't know the details. So, los geht's.
Breaking news! Germany's government has collapsed. The country is now in a state of anarchy with nobody in charge and it's complete chaos everywhere. Is not what's actually happened, although some sensationalist news headlines might make you think so. To be clear, we still have a government, and in theory, the governing coalition is still in power, although in reality, it's not functioning as a coalition. Although, let's be honest, it never really did function as a coalition, so no change there. What has happened is that the Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, has fired the Finance Minister, Christian Lindner, and this represents the collapse of the coalition. Scholz also intends to subject himself to a vote of confidence, which could pave the way for an early election. To understand what's going on, you need to understand how a parliamentary democracy works. So here's a quick explanation for those who need it. I thought we'd agreed never to use that ever again. Every 4 years, the German people get to elect 600 or 700 representatives to the Bundestag. The Bundestag then elects a chancellor who becomes head of government and should ideally have the support of more than half the members of the Bundestag. The chancellor doesn't have to be a member of the Bundestag, but usually is. He then appoints a cabinet, again, normally members of the Bundestag. That cabinet then forms the government. In reality, of course, politicians work together in parties and parliamentary groups. Germany has more than 2 major political parties, and it has a system of proportional representation, which means that it is very rare for one single party to win an absolute majority. So, to be sure of getting the Bundestag votes needed, 2 or more parties will typically work together in a coalition.
Okay, I got it. You vote for a bunch of people, and then you take the people and you put them into coalitions, and then, then they work together. All right, got it.
They will agree on what policies they're going to pursue together, and the Chancellor allocates cabinet posts to the different coalition partners. After the last election, the only viable government was a 3-way coalition between the SPD, the Greens, and the FDP. The problem is that the FDP believes in staying out of debt, but the other 2 parties, particularly the Greens, had ideas for policies that they felt were necessary but would be very expensive. And this was a particular problem because the leader of the FDP, Lindner, was made finance minister, meaning that he had control over how much money the government could spend.
Oh, so he had the checkbook and he was cashing checks, baby.
Why was he put in charge of the finances? Because the FDP was in a position of being able to say, look, you can't form a government without us, so either we get the finance ministry or the deal's off.
Dude, politics is so stupid. I hate politics. So the guy that just got fired was basically like, give me the job that I want, or else nobody gets to play. Nobody gets to play the game unless I get to play how I want to play, basically. Got it. Cool.
A key component of the FDP's philosophy is the debt brake. A debt brake is when a government is not allowed to borrow more than a certain amount of money. In Germany, the national debt must not increase by more than 0.35% of GDP.
As an American, can't relate. Let's see. All right, here we go. United States national debt. All right, it looks like we are at 100,000 million billion, 35 trillion, 36 trillion almost. Ooh. Yeah, can't relate to the whole having a ceiling on your debt per year. Never heard of it. All right, let's continue.
This is written into the basic law, which is Germany's constitution, so it can't be overturned without a 2/3 majority in the Bundestag, which they're probably not going to get. But there are exceptions for natural disasters and financial crises. There's more to the debt brake than that, but the basic idea is to keep the country...
So during a financial crisis, you're able to go more into debt per year than normal. How does that make sense? Anyways.
Country's finances stable. It was passed in 2009, some months before the Greek debt crisis, which was triggered when government spending got out of control and resulted in massive tax increases and austerity measures, which impacted most on the poorest in society, as these things, of course, always do. However, a debt break can also have
again, cries in American.
Negative effects. In particular, it can discourage investment in the country's infrastructure. And most Germans will tell you that right now, Germany's infrastructure is in a very sorry state. That is to say, a government obviously shouldn't be allowed to bankrupt the country, but at the same time, it is sometimes necessary to borrow money in the short term to ensure that the economy stays healthy in the long term. And this is the argument that has plagued this coalition almost since it got started. Every time the SPD or the Greens wanted to implement some reform or other, it was blocked by the FDP, specifically by Lindner. We've known for a long time that the coalition was in trouble, but things really came to a head earlier this week when Scholz begged Lindner to let him override the debt break. But after all, the country's economy is in trouble. And Lindner refused, at which point Scholz fired him. And Scholz then
dang. Freaking roasted him. I mean, I know it's politics, but it is kind of scummy how he got into that position in the first place by basically being like, if you don't give me the job that I want, there's just basically not going to be a coalition. That's kind of messed up. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't really say much because everything has gone to shit in America, so what do I know?
Publicly accused Lindner of being petty-minded and irresponsible, which is the most interesting he's been since he had that eye patch. In return, Lindner has said that Scholz knew full well that the debt break was a red line for the FDP, and he had presented Scholz with alternatives, but he'd refused to consider them. This isn't actually the end of the coalition. It still remains in power, and so far nobody else has been fired.
So I'm just waiting for the files to transfer from my camera to the computer so that I can edit them into a video. And while I do that, I'm actually reading a news article about how Lindner has come out in public and has started accusing Scholz of skullduggery. But also, what I didn't realize when
the plot thickens.
I was writing the script for this video is that all the other FDP members of cabinet have resigned their cabinet posts, except for one, and I'll get back to him later on in the video.
Okay, so much more is happening than at first glance.
But we now know for certain that it is terribly dysfunctional.
Don't worry, Germany. It could be worse. You could be America right now.
It will probably, though, make it a lot more difficult for the government to get legislation through the Bundestag. So Scholz has announced that he intends to submit to a vote of confidence. This means that he will ask the Bundestag if they still support him. If more than 50% say yes, then Scholz stays in office. If not, then Scholz can, but doesn't have to, ask the president to dissolve the Bundestag and call for fresh elections. Scholz intends to do this on the 15th of January, which means that we could be having elections in late March. And that is actually only a few months earlier than we were expecting. So it is, in fact, not that big of a deal yet. In the meantime, because
I can see how on paper that's not that big of a deal, but I have to imagine within the political sphere for all the politicians, this is probably a very big deal, and they will probably cause a ruckus from this. If I know anything about politicians, doesn't matter what country you're in, they're going to cause a ruckus over some stupid stuff, you know.
As he says the country shouldn't have to suffer anymore, Scholz has met with Friedrich Merz, the leader of the main opposition group.
Wow, this guy does not look like a happy camper.
Group, the Union, in the hopes that he can persuade the Union to support his efforts to get the economy back on track. Effectively, he's hoping to be able to count on the Union to help him get legislation passed, even if the FDP does completely drop out of the coalition. But Merz has responded by demanding that Scholz call for a vote of confidence immediately so that we can have elections even sooner. And from Merz's point of view, that's actually perfectly rational. His party is currently benefiting from the coalition's disarray, so of course he wants elections as soon as possible.
And here it comes. Here comes the, you know what, politicians being politicians. Where can I take advantage of other people falling down and, you know, yep, that's politics.
And although this video is already longer than I'd intended, I should like to mention Volker Wissing. He's the current transport minister and was a member of the FDP. I say was because he's just resigned from the party, but not from the government. During his time as transport minister, Wissing has said a lot of things that you would expect an FDP politician to say, such as that we need to build more roads. The FDP relies on a lot of support from car manufacturers. But he's also done things that you wouldn't expect, such as efforts to improve public transport. The two big things, of course, have been the Deutschland ticket and the general overhaul of the mainline rail network. And it's here that I can understand his frustration with Lindner. The states and various transport operators have been complaining that the Deutschland ticket is underfunded and that they might need to cut services. The general overhaul is being financed not by actual money, but by moving numbers around on a spreadsheet. But this is now where we're at. Despite the sensationalist headlines, nothing much has changed at all. We've just had confirmed what we already knew.
Except for nearly all FDP cabinet members resigning. Bad day to be an FDP cabinet member.
And we're probably going to be voting in the spring instead of the autumn. And that, basically, is that.
All right, well, that was not nearly as bad as the headlines would make it seem. Can't say the same about America. Right now, the headlines are as bad as they seem. So at least you have that, Germany. You know, could be worse. Could be America. But I'm curious what you guys, the experts, have to say about it. What do you think of everything that's going on in Germany right now with the German government? Does this come as a surprise? Is this not surprising? Do you have any concerns about this? Are you worried about it at all? Or do you think this is all just going to blow over pretty quickly? Let me know your thoughts. I'm curious what you guys have to say about it. Leave your mustard down in the comments section below. At any rate, though, that's all the time that I have for today. Thank you guys so much for being here. And as always, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.